This is TWiT. I'm Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, host of TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech on the TWiT TV network, here with a breaking enterprise news story. I'm joined by Mr. Brian Chi of the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory and Mr. Carl Moberg from TailF, SDN expert. We're talking about Amazon. So we just found out that Amazon has had pretty much a bad day as far as networking is concerned. They had a brief outage earlier this morning, and they just had a massive outage for about an hour at the start of our broadcast news. Now, what we're seeing now is that it seems to have affected not just the Amazon website, but certain parts of the Amazon Web Services, specifically the management portion of the Amazon Web Services. Chibert, that sounds a little strange that the web services themselves would be untouched, but management for both AWS and Elastic Computing would go down in some parts of the country and be very difficult to access in others. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that we're probably looking at an attack, and we're probably looking at an attack directed at a public portal. Keep in mind, Amazon is not just one location, it's many locations, as is most cloud systems today. So more than likely what happened is we've got some hackers, or we have some organizations, or we might even have a nation state deciding to take it down. And they're going to go after a single or a group of services. So more than likely, our friends at Amazon are having a bad day because they're getting hit on their public-facing sites.
Carl, let me ask you about this. You're an expert in software-defined networks, and Amazon runs one of the greatest elastic computing clusters on the planet, both for storage and for pure processing power. It seems to me that this is the chink in the armor, because they realize that they're never going to be able to flood AWS or Elastic Compute. There's not enough traffic to throw at them that will bring them down. But the management portal does seem to be a little bit more vulnerable. Why is that? Why wouldn't they run the management portal on the same services that AWS and Elastic Computing would use?
That's a great question, and actually I've been poking around a little bit, and it is amazing, like you said, how many, let's say, how big the wall around Amazon is, how many points of presences they have, actually looking at their BGP to be exact. And of course, if you and I, for some strange reason, were to engage in something like that, trying to bring Amazon down, we wouldn't hammer on that huge wall, right? We would go for a headshot. And usually the headshot in any, and this is actually becoming more prevalent with SDN, is the controller or the controlling entity, right? That is truly the weak spot. Because if you take that out in any way, shape, or fashion, you will actually lose, depending on the exact details of how that works and how consistent it is or how much it's required by the underlying infrastructure, it can be a significant blast to the actual operations. And this actually ties all the way back down to the assumption that SDN does diverge a little bit from the totally distributed systems of the internet, what the internet used to be. And it does actually centralize assets that will make it more fragile, right? We're going to go away a little bit from the kind of Rand Corp idea of having indestructible national networks independent of nuclear blasts, right? Right. This is certainly not the case in these controller-based networks. Right.
Chibert, Twitter seems to be having fun with the outage. You got a bunch of people who are saying, "Oh no, Amazon is down. Hold me." You know, at the end of the world. It's not a huge, horrific event, but for networking people, it is interesting because Amazon has one of the most robust systems in the world. In fact, there's a story from Forbes that talks about how when they went dark, there was a 40% drop in traffic crossing networks in North America. That's amazing that one site that's not really delivering content, it's actually just delivering shopping pages, could account for that much traffic. Also, the fact that Amazon was losing approximately $66,000 per minute that they were down. Tell me, why do they have such a high level of traffic?
I got to argue a little bit. It's not, they are delivering content. Remember, they deliver a lot of books for Kindles and so forth. They also deliver video, and they also have one heck of a lot of trailers. So they do deliver quite a bit of data. Now, one of the things I do wonder about is with this modern day of global load balancing, why they couldn't shift to another point of presence. That's kind of an interesting question that I'm sure is going to be torn apart in lots and lots of gory detail in the days to come.
All right. Carl, let me go over to you because this does sound interesting because that's closer to what happened with their Elastic Compute cluster a few years back, where they had a misconfiguration. So one failed server actually caused the failure of 2 other servers and then 4 other servers. You had this domino effect of failures that knocked off servers that were supposed to be both fault tolerant and high available servers. Do you think that this might be a little bit of the same? I mean, Chibert's right. The portal should have shifted over to another region, to another network, to another part of the network that wasn't being attacked. And it wasn't possible for all their portals to be attacked at the same time. So does this smell more like an attack that turned into something bad because of a misconfiguration? Or is this just they never threw enough resources at the web management tools?
Well, it's really hard to speculate, right? It doesn't seem like they've lost connectivity, so it doesn't seem like a transport issue. It doesn't seem like they lost their BGP or, connectivity with the rest of the world. So, and again, this is speculation. But if you think about what has happened, again, with these types of services, is that we've gone from a strictly distributed systems. That has its pros and cons in itself, of course, but where you could literally take out large parts of it, it would reconverge to something. And you've moved many of these features into a centralized a centralized structure, so to speak, and that will open for new attack vectors.
Right.
So again, trying to even fathom what it would mean to have, let's say, geographical portability for controllers or for controlling applications. I mean, these are things that we are just now learning about, right? Just the whole idea of having the same sort of fault tolerance or redundance for the control plane that we have for the forwarding plane still just isn't around. So again, if you want to go for the headshot, go for the controlling entities. And if this turns out to be a correct assumption, then that was, sort of a black hat fashion clever move.
Yeah. Chibert, I'm going to throw the last question over to you. We've actually got Blue in NOLA in our chat room who is saying that 40% figure actually was for Google going dark. But it still remains an interesting question because we are seeing more news about some of these larger providers having outages. Even though it seems that they're up all the time, the outages they do make front page news because we're more and more dependent on these public web services. Do we expect to see at some point us having this problem licked? Are we going to get the controller thing licked? Are we going to get the portal thing licked? Are we going to get the resource thing licked? Or is there always going to be that misconfigured switch, that misconfigured server farm, that high availability cluster that really isn't high available?
I have high hopes for the whole concept of software-defined networks and open networks and things like that because it gives us a layer of abstraction. If I have to go and manually configure 20 or 30 switches, I am probably going to make a mistake. And by having this layer of abstraction, it means I've got less chance of mistakes because it's actually playing cookie cutter. So I have very, very high hopes for SDN to solve those kinds of problems. Now, as far as maybe this is an attack by someone that doesn't like us, the unfortunate fact of life is there's an awful lot of people out there that really don't like us. And they seem to have way too much time on their hands. And when you start having the resources of a nation state pounding on us, well, it's going to take some very creative thinking on how to get around that.
Creative thinking indeed. Chibert, Carl, thank you very much for coming on to talk about this Amazon outage. We're going to bring you to your regularly scheduled TWiT programming, but I should mention that Amazon is up, and right now you should go, hopefully here, the editors will fix it, and buy something from Amazon, from the TWiT affiliates. I'm Father Robert Ballas, the Digital Jesuit. So long.